The chapel froze when my mother's voice cut through the air. "You changed your name." Not shock judgment. Every head turned. My father's hand tightened on the program. My brother stopped laughing in the doorway. I slid into the second row seat, the page still warm in my palm, my new name printed in a black that looked almost deliberate. The chair beside me, the one marked family, remained untouched, just like every milestone they'd missed. But as I looked at that empty space, something shifted. They thought today's silence exposed me. They had no idea it was exposing them. I grew up learning how to shrink myself between louder lives. In our house in Austin, noise meant importance, and importance never belonged to me. I remember the way my mother's heels clicked across the tile whenever Brendan needed something louder, sharp, or urgent in a way my needs never were. Vivian always got the soft tone, the warm hands on her shoulders, the lingering attention that made the room bend toward her. I was the quiet one, the one who cleaned her own messes, packed her own lunches, and learned early not to interrupt the conversations that flowed over me like water. The first time I noticed the pattern, I was 12. Vivian had a school art show, a row of painted canvases propped along the gym wall. My mother hovered near her, smiling for neighbors, brushing non-existent lint off her dress. I stood in the corner holding the certificate I'd received earlier that morning, an award for a regional science competition. No one in my family came. They didn't even remember the time. Mom passed me as if I were part of the background. "Hold your sister's jacket," she said, handing me the soft fabric without a glance. I folded the certificate into my pocket, the paper crinkling loud enough to echo. No one heard it. Years later, during my high school graduation, they arrived late. The ceremony had already started. My row of classmates shuffled as they searched for seats. When my name was called, I stood scanning the sea of faces for the four that mattered. Only one chair in the family section was empty, mine. My siblings had gone to a lake party and my parents were caught in traffic, though I learned later they'd stopped for coffee. I held the program so tightly the corner tore off. I swallowed the sting and sat down slowly as if careful movements could hide the emptiness. College wasn't different. At Rice, I sent reminders weeks ahead for a departmental award ceremony. Vivian texted back a heart emoji. Brendan left it on scene. My parents replied 3 days later with a casual, "We'll try." They never showed. That night I ate takeout alone on the dorm steps, my award resting beside me, still inside the envelope they didn't open. The older I got, the quieter I became. I learned that pushing back only led to Mom's familiar refrain, "Don't be dramatic, Evelyn." Dad would nod in agreement without lifting his eyes from his phone. My protests became shorter each year until they disappeared entirely. The last flashback that stayed with me, stuck like a splinter, was the ceremony where I presented early research on desalination. 5 seats reserved, all empty. I held a folded program in my hand, smoothing the same crease over and over, trying to pretend the hollow beside me wasn't noticeable. A text buzzed, then a photo of Brendan grilling at a backyard party. "Wish you were here," he wrote. He didn't mean it. That was the day I learned my place in the family. A quiet space at the edge of their lives, never truly seen unless I stayed silent. The shift didn't happen in one moment. It built slowly like pressure behind a door I'd kept closed for years, but the day it finally cracked was ordinary, quiet, deceptively normal. 8 months before my dissertation defense, I sent the announcement to my family. A clean, formal notice from the university date and time printed in sharp black ink. I mailed it to the house in Austin, texted the reminder, added it to the family group chat. April 22nd, 3 p.m., I wrote. My mother responded hours later with a distracted, "So proud, sweetheart." Vivian sent a thumbs up. Brendan typed nice. I told myself it was enough. Through winter, I repeated the date at every Sunday dinner. Mom nodded without lifting her eyes from her phone. Dad murmured something that might have been agreement. Vivian talked about her kids' soccer schedules. Brendan circled back to his latest barbecue experiments. I reminded them anyway. 5 months, 3 months, 6 weeks, 2. Each reminder felt like tapping on a locked window, soundless from the other side. Then in February, Brendan posted the invitation. "Spring Barbecue Bash," the graphic said. April 22nd, 1 dear 6 p.m. I stared at the screen long enough for the pixels to blur. When I called him, he sounded genuinely confused. "What time is your thing again?" he asked, like he hadn't heard it 20 times. 3 o'clock, I said. "People can do both," he replied. "Just come after." Stanford was an hour away. He knew that. He didn't care. I called Mom next. She laughed softly. "Honey, don't be dramatic. We'll work something out." But I felt it then, the quiet, sinking certainty. They weren't confused. They weren't busy. They simply chose something else. Someone else. Like always. The final confirmation came the day before my defense. Mom answered over loud music, her voice thin between bursts of laughter. "I'm at Brendan's helping set up," she said. "Total chaos here." And tomorrow I asked. 3 o'clock, right? "We'll be there," she said, distracted. "Vivian's bringing dessert." She hung up before I could respond. The next afternoon, standing in the hallway outside Patterson Hall, my phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Mom asked. "We're all at Brendan's." I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence fill the space between us, heavy and final. And in that silence, something inside me clicked into place. I didn't cry in the hallway outside Patterson Hall. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't explain. I gathered my notes, walked into the auditorium, and defended 8 years of work to a room missing 5 faces that should have been there. And when it was over, when "Congratulations, Dr. Evelyn Brennan" echoed across the chamber, I felt nothing but an ache so familiar it was almost quiet. That night, while messages from my family stacked unanswered on my screen, I sat alone in my apartment with the blinds half closed. The glow from my desk lamp pooled across the table, washing over piles of research papers, my laptop, and the program from the ceremony. I smoothed the crease running down its center. One last time. Then I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Transition. No emotions, no hesitation. Just a folder and the first step toward a life they would no longer have access to. I started with the essentials. I downloaded the name change petition from the county website, printed it. The sound of the printer humming in the quiet apartment felt strangely grounding. Instruction pages, required documents, identification guidelines. I highlighted each section with steady strokes. My pen didn't waver once. Next, financial accounts. I logged into each one, updating contact information, saving statements into the new folder labeled Records. I exported 2 spreadsheets, one listing every account tied to my old name, another mapping how each would shift under the new one. It wasn't revenge, it was order. By midnight, the folder held more structure than my family had offered me in years. The next morning, I woke early. The air was cool sunlight, sharp through the blinds. I brewed a cup of coffee, the steam rising in slow ribbons, while I reviewed the petition one last time. Then I changed clothes, navy blouse, pressed slacks, hair pulled neatly back, and drove to the county courthouse. The building loomed pale and quiet against the sky. Inside, the clerk slid a stack of forms toward me. "Fill these out," she said. I nodded, found a seat by the window, and began. Line by line. Signature by signature. My new name, Evelyn Morrison, settled into each blank space like it belonged there. When I handed the documents back, the clerk stamped the top page, the sound crisp final. "Processing takes a few weeks," she said. "That's fine," I replied. Outside, the sun felt different, clearer, less like something I had to earn. The next phase took days. Quiet ones. I updated my email first. A clean address, unlinked to family. I transferred all research materials to a new cloud drive, deleted the old one. I archived messages from colleagues, mentors, and friends. The only thing I didn't delete was a small folder named Ruth, filled with photos of my grandmother and the birthday letters she'd mailed me through college. Her handwriting had always looked certain, even when mine trembled. By the end of the week, my digital life no longer contained the name Brennan. The physical transition came next. I boxed up my apartment, books stacked neatly, clothes folded in long rows, frames turned face down and wrapped in paper. I stood in the center of the living room the night before the movers arrived, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of a streetlight outside. My phone lit up every few minutes, calls, texts, missed attempts to grasp what they'd never held in the first place. I didn't answer. When the truck pulled away, carrying everything I owned toward Portland, I locked the apartment door and rested my hand on the cool metal for a moment. Not sentiment, just stillness. The drive north took 2 days. Long stretches of highway muted radiostatic rest stops with flickering vending machines. I stopped only for gas and coffee. Each mile felt like dissolving threads, thin, frayed connections falling away behind me. Portland greeted me with gray skies and a soft drizzle. Perfect, I thought. A city where silence didn't feel like a punishment, but a way of breathing. My new apartment was small, but bright with a narrow balcony overlooking a quiet street lined with trees. I placed my boxes by the window and opened the one labeled Work. Research papers, a notebook, a single photo of me and my grandmother at a long-past birthday dinner. I pinned it above my desk. The next morning, I walked into the environmental consulting firm that had offered me a position months earlier. A receptionist greeted me warmly. My new colleagues introduced themselves one by one. No one asked about my family. No one compared me to a sibling. I sat at my new desk, logged into my new account, and felt a strange, unfamiliar steadiness settle in my chest. In the evenings, I continued the quiet work. I changed the name on my driver's license, updated my voter registration, replaced my medical records, reassigned emergency contacts, closed the last bank account with the old surname. Each task brought its own small sound, the tap of keys, the click of a button, the soft rip of an envelope. Not dramatic, not triumphant, but precise. Controlled. Mine. Some nights I'd sit at my desk with the window cracked open, letting the cool air drift inside. I'd reach for a form, a bill, a document, and feel that familiar tightening in my chest ease just a little. This time I thought sliding another page into the completed folder. I won't fix what they've broken. It wasn't a vow, just a boundary. Finally written down. The notification arrived on a gray morning, weeks after I'd settled into Portland. Your name change petition has been approved, it read. A simple sentence. A quiet switch flipped. I printed the confirmation, the page still warm, when I slipped it into a folder labeled Identity. The new documents, license, bank cards, workplace records had already begun updating. Soon, nothing would carry the name my family forgot on purpose. I didn't announce it. I didn't message anyone. I just lived. But silence has a way of echoing when people expect noise. The first ripple came from an email forwarded to my new inbox by HR. Your emergency contact attempted access, the header said. My old number disconnected. My old email archived. My personnel file flagged them as unverified relationship. The system locked them out automatically. Another ripple arrived the following week. The apartment manager from Austin left a voicemail on my new work phone. Your family has been trying to reach us for your forwarding address. We cannot disclose without written consent. I didn't give any. A month later, I powered on the old phone I kept in a drawer. 83 missed calls from my mother, dozens from Vivian, a handful from Brendan, one from Dad. Each voicemail grew more frantic than the last. Where are you? This isn't funny. We need to talk about the graduation. You're blowing it out of proportion. You can't just vanish. This silence is childish. You owe us an explanation. I owed them nothing. I turned the phone off and placed it back in the drawer. The air felt lighter. Then came the moment everything aligned. Great Aunt Ruth passed away quietly, peacefully. She was one of the few people who ever saw me, truly saw me, and I knew I had to go. Not for my family, but for her. The chapel in Austin looked the same as the last time I'd been there, polished wood, soft lighting air, thick with lilies. I arrived early and sat near the aisle hands folded around the printed program. The name on it, Evelyn Morrison, was still strange to my family. But it wasn't strange to me. Not anymore. They arrived in a wave. My mother stopped mid-step when she saw me. You changed your name. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. My father's jaw tightened. Vivian blinked in disbelief. Brendan looked like someone had slapped the air from his lungs. Their eyes flicked to the program, then to me, then back again. You should have told us, Mom said under her breath. You should have shown up, I replied, my voice level. She opened her mouth ready to argue, but the chapel attendant signaled for quiet. During the service, they watched me more than the ceremony. Every so often, Mom's gaze slid toward me, confusion, frustration, something like fear. The same fear people feel when a familiar map has been redrawn without them. After the final hymn, she followed me outside. "Evelyn, this isn't fair," she whispered. "We made a mistake. Families move past things." I stood by my rental car, the soft wind shifting the edge of my coat. "You chose a barbecue over my doctorate," I said. "You didn't forget. You prioritized." "That's not true, it is," I said. "And now the systems I exist in only recognize people who show up. You weren't listed. The rest handled itself." Her face tightened as if the realization finally landed. There was no argument she could make to undo a court record, a state file, a digital identity. Love could be claimed, but paperwork was immune to guilt. Vivian approached next. "You didn't have to go this far," she said. "I didn't go far," I answered. "I went where I was seen." Brendan didn't speak at all. I got into the car, closed the door, and watched their shapes blur through the windshield. They couldn't follow, not legally, not digitally, not emotionally. The life tied to my old name had ended without ceremony. The one tied to my new name had already begun. And for the first time, the loss wasn't mine. Portland settled around me the way a soft night settles around a cooling street, quiet, unhurried, indifferent in the gentlest way. Months passed, and the rhythms of my new life formed themselves without effort. I walked to work under low gray skies. I brewed coffee in the small kitchen of my apartment, the sound of water filling the silence instead of breaking it. On my desk, drafts of water reclamation models spread across the wood in careful lines, lit by a diffuse morning glow that made everything look calmer than I felt. Slowly, the stillness stopped feeling foreign. My name, Evelyn Morrison, appeared on memos and email signatures on project briefs. Each time I saw it, something inside me anchored a little deeper. At meetings, colleagues asked for my opinion without comparing me to anyone else. After work, a coworker would invite me for coffee, or Alex would meet me at a small cafe tucked between two brick buildings. He listened. He remembered details. He asked about the desalination project I'd been refining for years, and he didn't pretend interest, he showed it. Some nights, I'd sit on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, the city humming softly in the distance. The rain traced lines down the railing, steady and unbothered. I thought about the empty chair at my defense, the one I'd stared at for a long moment before starting my presentation. The image returned now and then, but its shape had changed. It wasn't an ache anymore. Just a memory, small and flat, like a photograph tucked at the back of a drawer. I didn't hate them. That surprised me. Hatred required weight, and I no longer carried theirs. The paperwork had done one thing I never could. It carved a clean boundary. Not a barricade, just a line. On one side, the life where I waited to be chosen. On the other, the life where I didn't. When I left the courthouse months earlier, I hadn't been running from my family. I'd been walking toward myself, toward a name that belonged to someone who showed up for me even when no one else did. Now, in the soft drizzle of an Oregon evening, I realized something quieter than forgiveness, simpler than closure. I wasn't missing anymore. I had arrived. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're proofs of where you finally learned to stand. My family spent years forgetting me in rooms I worked hard to enter. So I built a life in a place where showing up wasn't optional. Now, when I sign my name, Evelyn Morrison, the silence that follows isn't empty. It's mine. And some doors stay closed simply because I no longer knock.